Everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to make a reaction video on Stephen Graham. I have not yet seen this video, but a lot of people have been sending it to me and saying, Jorge, what do you think about this video? So here is my reaction of watching this video for the first time. We're gonna go ahead and pause when needed so that I can share my thoughts. With that, without further ado, let's jump right in.
Metro Police cracking down on Airbnb and short-term rental properties.
And the people who invested their money in it, hoping for some passive income, aren't getting it.
More than 4,000 Airbnb.
Why does she have to start the video that way? Obviously, she doesn't have Airbnbs. Obviously, she's not a real estate investor. Obviously, she's in a 9-to-5 where she's trading time for money. Anyway, let's just continue with the video.
Airbnbs and short-term rentals could soon disappear from Atlanta.
The short-term vacation rental market is oversaturated.
What's up, Graham? It's Guys here, and it's no surprise the housing market is falling. Although the real magic of Airbnb comes with their business model, which is entirely centered around what's called the sharing economy. This allows Airbnb to operate without owning any real estate, managing any tenants, or cleaning dirty units.
That's true. So you could, of course, buy property. You could do arbitrage where you rent properties, get permission in writing, and then launch them on Airbnb with the landlord's permission. Or you could start a management company where you just get a percentage of all the revenue with no downside and a piece of all the upside, no money out of pocket. So let's continue.
Instead, they facilitate the exchange of information between a short-term tenant and a landlord while receiving a cut of every single transaction. In this case, Airbnb charges guests a 14% service fee and a host fee of 3%.
That's true. The people who are booking the Airbnb pay about a 14% fee. So the nightly rate, the cleaning fee, the transient occupancy tax, plus this 14%. For us who are hosting properties, we only get charged 3%. And we as the host keep 97%, which I think is great because if you think about it, right, as a business, usually you got to do marketing, sales, have your own website, have your own, do your own advertising or for direct bookings. But in this exchange, Airbnb is doing all the marketing, all the sales, collecting all the payments. You don't need a merchant or a merchant processor. They do all of that for us as hosts, and we get to keep 97%. So let's continue.
However, as successful as they might appear to be, there's also a dark side that isn't quite talked about, and it all starts here, the Airbnb effect. This occurs when inventory gets taken off the market for the use of short-term rentals, increasing the price for everybody else. In this case, it was found that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings leads to a 0.018% increase in rents.
First of all, 18% increase in rents. Let's bring out the calculator, guys. So if the rent was before Airbnb, right, before that 1%, if somebody was paying, say, $3,000 in rent, and now we increase that by 0.018, you're talking about a 54-cent increase. Not even a dollar, 54 cents of an increase. So if you used to pay $3,000 a month in rent, and now there's a 1% increase in Airbnb listings, that means your rent went up 54 cents. That's crazy. So instead of $3,000, now you're paying $3,000.54. Not even $3,000 and $1. Half of $1, basically.
And a 0.026% increase in house prices. As a result, many cities have begun to ban Airbnb entirely or choose to regulate it.
Now, increase in house prices, right? So if a house was normally, let's just use $500,000, right? And now we increase that by 0.026%, the price went up $130. It's interesting how they make such a massive deal about these numbers. But again, if a house would normally sell for $500,000, because of the Airbnb supply, the purchase price of that property went from $500,000 to $500,130. That's basically nothing, right?
For example, Los Angeles no longer allows Airbnb to operate if the property falls under rent control. Las Vegas is about to remove all Airbnb listings.
And just to clarify, rent control would be considered anything with 2 units or more. But single family homes, yes, we can. In fact, I have multiple Airbnbs myself in the city of LA, and but they can only be single family homes.
All of a sudden, people began renting and subleasing properties in a process known as Airbnb arbitrage, where they'd guarantee the landlord a fixed rate and then they would profit the difference from what the home actually generates. Look, as a former real estate agent, I saw so many people doing this from 2012 through 2018. They would buy homes in popular tourist destinations or rent properties for 1 to 3 years that they could then sublet on Airbnb. They would hire a management team that would build it out, and
It's a great business model.
then they would scale up insanely quickly. But naturally, anything this good is eventually going to get abused, and that's what we started to see. First, we had people renting out illegal structures on Airbnb for a profit. Then we had people trying...
That's true. There have been people over the years, and people have been renting out illegal structures with long-term tenants. So it's just interesting how some people will say, well, Airbnb, some people are doing Airbnbs on illegal structures, but people have been doing that with long-term tenants, like renting out to long-term tenants with illegal structures since humans have ever existed, right? Like, how many of you have known of people that have illegally converted their garages into a dwelling unit and then rented it out to a family for 12 months, right? This stuff has been happening forever. Or people have created multiple units out of the homes that they live in or out of rental properties in order to create multiple streams of income and have multiple tenants. So this is not just happening with Airbnb. This has been happening with all the other types of rental strategies since humans began being on this earth.
To circumvent HOA regulations by renting out their condo, and then you had people renting out their homes on Airbnb for massive parties until that was also banned.
That's true, and that is something that Airbnb is against parties. Myself, my thousands of students, we are all against parties because part of the reason there is a challenge with hosting Airbnbs and with regulation is all because of the parties. Parties have ruined it for everybody.
You might even remember a somewhat viral story a few months ago where an Airbnb manager was stunned that more than half of his homes were empty over Super Bowl weekend while he had to reduce prices by more than 60% just to get some of them rented.
This is very true. There are areas that have been drastically impacted. And when I look at real estate and, when I host a webinar or a 5-day challenge, or I'm just talking on an Instagram live or on a YouTube video, I talk about primary locations, secondary locations, and tertiary locations. For example, in Los Angeles, we have really nice areas where rents are really high to rent properties. Properties are extremely high to purchase properties, and these are typically areas where you require a really high income, better credit scores, higher net worth individuals, or just people who make a lot more money in their careers or in their businesses. And these areas that everybody wants to live in, where there's a lot of demand, not everybody can actually afford to rent or buy properties. And if these are the most desirable areas, right, this is what I call a primary location. For example, in Orange County, California, which is Southern California, we have Newport Beach. This is a really beautiful area that is, super high end. And in order to live there, your rent's going to be like maybe $5,000 to $10,000 or even way more, maybe $15,000 or $20,000, right? It is one of the most desirable areas. Now, if you go 30 minutes east, you're going to end up in an area called the Inland Empire. This is more of a secondary location. And if you go another 30 to 50 miles east, you're going to end up in an area called Joshua Tree. And Joshua Tree is a tertiary area. These tertiary locations 2 years ago or even a year ago were doing extremely well. And you could have launched an Airbnb almost anywhere within that city and made cash flow every single month. But now that the market has contracted and people are spending less money, those tertiary and some secondary areas are struggling financially. Therefore, you should only stick to primary locations. So like if you want to launch in Texas, go to the best areas of Austin, Texas. Go to the best areas of Dallas, Texas. If you want to be in California, go to the best areas of Los Angeles County. Go to the best areas of Orange County or San Diego County. And if you want to be in Florida, go to the best areas of Miami, the best areas of Orlando, and stay away from those secondary or tertiary areas that are more affordable, because those are the areas that are struggling the most right now. So again, you got to make sure you stick to the primary areas. And the second thing I want to share is make sure you run your numbers on AirDNA. Go into the rentalizer section, plug in the address, and whatever the projected revenue is for the next 12 months, subtract it by about 15%. And if the numbers still make sense, then move forward. The reason some people are struggling today is they didn't know how to do their due diligence, right? They didn't know how to verify the numbers to make sure it would be profitable. And number two, they didn't know how to get a permit or even know if you can get a permit in the first place. So a lot of these things could be avoided if you have experience, if you have a track record, or if you're learning from someone that knows what they're doing.
In this case, people were listing their homes online, they were participating in rental arbitrage, or they were specifically buying properties because they wanted that sweet, sweet Airbnb passive income. However, just as competition was increasing, interest rates began to rise. Consumers suddenly had less money to spend. Remote work was a lot less encouraged.
And that's what I just mentioned, right? As people started to spend less money and travel not as often to those tertiary or secondary markets, that's where the demand started to dry up, but the same supply was still there. And that's why those areas like the Joshua Trees and the Yucca Valleys and these tertiary locations where it's more affordable to rent a property or buy a property are struggling today.
So here are my thoughts on Airbnb, and I say all of this as a former real estate agent, current real estate investor, and landlord. First of all, if you're buying a property for an investment, above all else, make sure it actually cash flows without the use of Airbnb.
I agree, and I've been coaching on Airbnb since 2018, right? So for 5 years now. And anyone who has ever purchased a property to specifically do Airbnb, I've always told my students, make sure the numbers pencil out with long-term tenants. Because if it only makes sense with Airbnb, you should not buy the property. Because what if in 5 years Airbnb is not here? Or in 10 years Airbnb is not here? Then what? You need to always have multiple exit strategies. So it needs to pencil in with long-term tenants, and an Airbnb is going to be like a cherry on top.
It's really important to understand that the reason people make so much money on Airbnb is because it's a lot of work. I know people who run Airbnbs, and it's a full-time job to make sure the house is cleaned, fully stocked.
95% of the US population are employees. So whenever you go into Airbnb and you don't have any entrepreneur experience, or you are not learning from someone that is teaching you the correct way to do this, you end up doing all this work yourself. But today, right, we have 18 short-term rentals, right? And that would be a lot of work if I was doing everything. But I have a manager that manages all of the cleaners, the people who do maintenance, the landscapers, the pool maintenance, the virtual assistants who do the communication. And I only spend like an hour a week, not even a day, an hour a week. That's like 4 hours a month overseeing my manager who oversees everything, because I'm working on the business, not in the business. I built a team and a system that works even when I don't. So I've turned a business that is a high operation, high intense operation business to a mostly passive business, to a 95% passive business.
For example, rents are falling nationwide, and if they can't afford to eat the cost, then Airbnb is an additional option that's worth looking into. This is also happening at the same time that local regulations are making it more difficult to list and rent. That's why I absolutely believe that we are in the middle of an Airbnb bust, while inefficient market operators are going out of business.
I do agree with that. There will be people who will continue to struggle when they don't have the right systems, the right team, just like anything, guys, right? The reality is 75% of people who own a business, not in Airbnb, I'm talking all the industries, 75% of people go out of business within 10 years. And most of the time it's because they are solo operators, right? Solopreneurs who are wearing all the hats in the business. And if they don't work, the business stops making money and it stops serving clients. However, more than 80% of franchises succeed after 10 years. And the difference is a franchise has what? Teams and systems. Just like a McDonald's, right? They got crappy food, great business systems. So if you have the right business infrastructure, you have 10 times the more likability of succeeding.
Be a great opportunity to stand out from the crowd, especially if you have a very compelling description about the property, as our sponsor Grammarly is able to assist with. But I don't believe that you should rely solely on Airbnb for income, just in case something were to happen.
Just to wrap this video up, as you can see, there are people who are losing money because they're operating in the wrong locations. They don't understand regulation. They don't understand how to run the data to verify if you could be profitable. They don't know how to build a team and a system. They end up becoming like a slave to their own business because the business doesn't work unless they are physically there trading time for money. And that will happen with any business in any industry. So in short, in 2023, you have to make sure that you do your due diligence, verify the numbers on AirDNA and MatchVisor. Make sure you can actually get a permit in the city. Whatever data you see, if it says that you are projected to make $100,000 in gross revenue, subtract about 15% and only account for about $85,000. And if your rent is going to be half or less than half than that $85,000, then it definitely makes sense to move forward. With that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys smash the like button and hit that subscribe button as well. And make sure you guys check out one of my other videos here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.